Hi, this is Mashnu, and it's day 5 of our middle game training. So I have a position here for you that is very interesting, and well, this game fragment is at a certain point a bit complicated, but I think we can get clarity about the most important things at least. What I want to ask you is once more to pause the video and think for about 3, 4 or 5 minutes, something like that, and see if you can find a plan for white to play here. Have a look at what the imbalances are in the position, what is the characteristics, what is happening, what would you like to achieve, and see if you can make a plan and find some variations. I'll continue the explanation in a moment. So okay, let's see. What we see here is lots of tension around this d6 pawn, and the d file is very important here. Both players are fighting for the d file. The game, by the way, was played, I believe I didn't mention it at the beginning, was played in 1971 in the Soviet Union by Didishko and Versov. So we have this tension on the d file, and if we start fantasizing with white and we start thinking what would white want to achieve here, it would be very interesting to get rid of this c6 pawn so we can get control over the d5 square. Just imagine that the knight could go from f1 to e3 to d5 without the pawn being there on c6. Then this knight would be very strong here, and the pawn on d6 would be blocked, so the bishop on c7 would be blocked in his own pawn structure. And that's the plan that was executed by the white player here. He did it by playing the move b4 to b5. It's a beautiful positional sacrifice. He sacrifices a pawn, and the compensation that he gets is control over an important square. That's what we call a positional sacrifice. Sacrificing material in order to gain positional advantage. There are of course other options. I'll just show you one or two other possibilities in this position. One thing that we could of course do is to release the tension by taking c takes b6, bishop takes b6, and if we do this, we must always think, okay, what changes then in the position? In fact, black's pieces become more active, because this bishop on b6 has this beautiful diagonal towards f2, and if it's possible, black would like very much to advance this d pawn, so the d6 pawn doesn't become weak later. So taking on b6 is not a good idea. Another option would be to play c4, and that's also a sacrifice, sacrificing the c pawn. The idea of that would be that if black takes on c4, we can play a rook to c1. After the rook goes, if it would go back to e6, then it's good for us, because we take then on b6, and after bishop takes b6, we can take the pawn on c6 and increase the pressure on d6. On the other hand, this bishop once more has more mobility, but the knight could also go to d5. Now of course the queen, after rook to c1, doesn't need to go back to e6, it could also go to b5, and that's a better move, because from there it defends also b6, c6 I mean. So if c takes b, now bishop takes b6, the d6, the c6 pawn is defended, and the bishop has this beautiful diagonal there. So this is about the move c4. In the game, as I said, the move b5 was played. This is a very interesting move, and very, I think it is a very good and correct positional sacrifice. C takes b5 was played here, and now white advances the pawn from c5 to c6. This is important, of course, because we don't want to black to take on c5, and also we don't want to trade the d6 pawn, the c5 pawn for the d6 pawn, because then this possible weakness on d6 will be dissolved. So that's why it's important here to advance to c6. As long as the black pawns stay on b6 and d6, the bishop on c7 will be crippled. It's locked in, it has no mobility, and this is what we want to keep like that with white. Rook to e7 is played now. Rook was attacked. This is the only place where it could go. Knight to f1, of course with the same plan that I told you before. Bishop to b8. Now what's the idea behind bishop to b8? The bishop doesn't want to go anywhere. The thing is that he's making this c7 square available for the rook, because black wants to start attacking this c6 pawn. Knight to e3, rook to c7, rook to c3 now. This is important. We cannot continue with our own plan with knight to d5, because then rook takes c6 and we will have sacrificed now 2 pawns for a positional advantage here on d5, but 2 pawns is quite a lot, so we don't need to do that. That's why white plays first a rook to c3. The move knight to d5 can come later if necessary. Black plays here the rook from d8 to c8. Now with this move the pawn on c6 is attacked twice. We cannot defend it one more time unless we play queen to d5. That's the only option, in fact. Instead of doing that, white now played a queen takes d6. So this d6 pawn that had become weak is taken now. And before we do such a thing, we need to calculate a lot. Here is where things start becoming a bit complicated, because to play queen takes d6 we need to calculate what happens if queen takes queen, what happens if after queen takes d6 from white black plays a rook c7 takes c6. These are all complications that start arising, and we need to make our calculations as sharp as possible, and this is not always easy. When the variations become very long in our calculation, then sometimes we get lost, and sometimes we make mistakes, and well, many games are lost or won because of mistakes in calculations, because we simply in our calculation miss a certain moves. In fact, this happened to the black player as well here in this game. Let's see the continuation. Queen takes d6 and rook takes c6 was played. It would have been better to trade queens for black, but let me show you first how the game continued, then we will return to this position. Queen takes e6, f takes e6, now rook d7 check, king goes to f6, and of course he cannot go to the back rank, because then we trade rooks first on c6, and after he has retaken, then we give a check on d8, capturing the bishop. So that's why king to g8 or something like that, it doesn't work. So king to f6 is played, and now black played here, I'm sorry, white played here the move h4. Here black replied g5. Now of course we have a threat of knight to g4 checkmate here, right? So black cannot take on c3. Rook takes c3, knight g4 is checkmate, because with h4 we're controlling this g5 square. He played g5 in this position, and white did something very smart, and that is to advance the pawn from h4 to h5. So again we see that the king has no place to go. All the squares around the king are controlled by white, so we stay with the same threat of checkmating the king. So rook takes c3 is once more not possible. Now how to prevent this checkmate? He tried a g4. Knight takes g4 check, king goes to g5, rook g7 check. Now the king cannot go, well, it can go to h4, but then it's checkmating one move. The same thing if it takes on h5. In both cases rook to h3 follows with checkmate. So king went to f4, and now white played the move rook to e3, and here it's checkmate in the next move with the beautiful pawn move g3. Whatever black does in this position, the next move of white will be g2 to g3 checkmate, because the king has been persuaded to enter into this mating net. Now let's go back to the position where I told you that black made a mistake and he could have better traded the queens. I'll jump to that position. It's right this position. So here he took on c6, and as I said, calculation is very important, and black probably did a miscalculation when he did this. He didn't see this whole mating net being built by white. Now a correct move would be queen takes d6. After rook takes queen, then move the rook from c7 to e7, attacking the rook on d6 with the bishop. Then this rook could go, for example, to d5, and then black can attack the pawn on c6 once more, but from the side this time, so the pawn on e5 stays defended by the bishop. And here actually white has to give this c pawn, and he will get the b5 pawn in return. For example, by playing c7, rook takes c7, and now first rook c to d3, so saving this rook, controlling the d file, and after this we can try to capture this pawn on b5. So let's say that the position is well, perhaps not exactly equal, but it has chances for both sides, because a lot is happening and the result of the game is not clear yet. So this would have been the correct continuation. Now let's have a look at the whole example again, just in a faster tempo. b5 is the first move. The idea is to sacrifice this pawn and to gain control over the d5 square. c6 is played, and now the knight is rerouted towards this d5 square, but at this moment something changes because black starts attacking the c6 pawn, so we need to defend it first. Rook goes to c8, and here white took on d6. Yes, and here we see this miscalculation of black. He doesn't see that an attack against his king is coming after trading queens. This f pawn makes the 7th rank weak, so rook to d7, going back to the back rank is impossible, because then rook takes rook, rook takes rook, check on d8 and capture the bishop on b8, so king to f6, but now the king is going to be checkmated on g4 or h3, so rook to e3 is the last move. Now I want to give you one more thing to think about, and that is, what if instead of g5 black would have played h5, controlling the g4 square? So now we have no checkmate there. What could we play here with white? I'm not going to give the answer. It is not easy, it's quite complicated, but perhaps you would like to calculate, to do some calculation exercise. So I'll leave it just like this, and if you want, examine if there is a win for white here, or perhaps is this the saving move for black, h5. That's it. I hope you found this interesting. The main theme of this video is of course the positional sacrifice, and this calculation importance is of course something that is in this game very important, and right now you can continue this exercising this by looking at the consequences of h5. Alright, I'll say goodbye now, and I'll see you next time on YouTube. Goodbye.